hear the magic? We're going to be feeling the roar, because Thundercats are going to be loose with this episode of 101. That's right, we're going to break down the OG Thundercats right for you to be able to see who they are, and what the Thundercats are. Editor popping in. So I want to make sure I end up saying this right. This is also inspired because of the entire ongoing series of Thundercats by Dakin Shively. Believe that's how you end up saying it. It's a little bit better how I ended up saying it in the first review. So hopefully that ends up working out. Back to our original content. Editor out. So that's going to be something that gives you a little bit background before you end up jumping in it. Not saying he doesn't do a good job for it, but just in case if you're more curious, that's something you're interested into. Or if you want to pick up Deacon's run on Thundercats, you could go visit the channel affiliate Organic Price Books, where you can end up using the discount code of 5th of Jack to save $2 off. Or if you have 4 more books, slap the code Jacket together, and you'll save 5% off your entire order instead. Orders of $30 or more ends up getting free shipping. And with that said, let's get into the sauce. We'll start off with what is Thundercats. Well, Thundercats are going to be characters that are feline equation mixed with a human. So I guess it is an anamorph. I think that's what they end up saying. But the backstory to them is that their home planet of Thundera is about ready to implode. So they end up doing a process trying to escape. In the process of escaping, they end up well, before I get too far with it, this ship is going to end up having the nobles of Cheetara, Panthro, Tygra, Willy Cat, Snarf, who's the nursemaid for young Lion-O, and Jaga. These are the nobles, and these are what are going to be called Thundercats, because the Thundercats are the noble versions of the Thunderians that you can end up seeing. With that said, let's go on sliding on over to what ends up happening next. The mutants end up trying to board their ship, looking for the artifact, the Eye of Thunder, which is embedded in the hilt of the Sword of Omens, the source of the Thundercats' power. In the process, they end up going over, having a little scrimmage back and forth, but Lion-O ultimately ends up picking up the sword, which is kind of a unique situation because he's super young and he wouldn't be able to pick up the sword. But the Eye of Thunder ends up helping him out. At least that's what ends up happening in the cartoons. If you're wondering about the comics, there's a slight little different variance that you end up having. But general lore, that's what ends up happening. In the process, their autopilot ends up becoming shoddy at best, and they had to do some repairs so they couldn't go to the galaxy that they were looking for in the first place. What was that galaxy? Well, unfortunately, I don't think we ever find out what that galaxy was. But they ended up finding this place called Earth. Well, I think it's called Third Earth is what it's going to end up calling. It's a place where they can end up breathing and not having any kind of problems. But they have to make the trips in these space suspension capsules. This is going to be where they end up having a little bit of a fight because they were going to try getting Jaga, who is the oldest out of the bunch, to end up being in the capsules, but there's no way that he can end up making the journey and still be alive. So it's decided that all the other Thundercats end up going into these space suspension capsules where they will be suspended at the age bracket or age that they are. After they all get into space suspension capsules, Jaga ends up taking the Sword of Omens and placing it right into the floor of the ship to overwatch all the Thundercats. After that, he ends up seeing the ways that he ends up going, and he ends up trying to drive the ship as far as he can before putting on that little faulty autopilot before anything happens. A little bit after that autopilot goes over, they end up landing, or should I say crash landing, where the ship ends up falling apart. And we end up finding out that, well, Lion-O's aged because his space suspension capsule has failed. So we have a young Lord of the Thundercats that comes over with it. So that gives you the brief synopsis of what you end up having for Thundercats. But let's dive into specifically the young Lord. And now this is the person that ends up leading the Thundercats and ultimately ends up going on the trials to become Not just a hereditary lord of the Thundercats, but the true lord of the Thundercats. There's a bunch of stories that's in between that you could end up going with it. But we're going to take this moment to be able to dive into what the characters are. So obviously we have Lion-O. He is a younger character that comes over with it. He has like a 7-year-old bat trapped into like a 30-year-old body. Well, not trapped. He aged into it. So he ended up having a bunch of different experiences that ended up maturing our young Lord of the Thundercats. He has the Sword of Omens. He has the Sword of Omens, which has the Eye of Thundera embedded into it. This is the source of the Thundercats' powers, and throughout the entire series, you end up seeing it have multiple different abilities that comes over with it. He also has the claw shield that the Sword of Omens ends up fitting into when it's a smaller sword. Following with Lion-O, there is Snarf. Snarf started as a nursemaid for Lion-O to make this entire journey, make sure that he doesn't get into trouble, and we ended up having that throughout the entire series. However, what's mostly different is most of the time that you'll end up finding out he doesn't talk, but in the cartoon he does talk. And at one point he was voted most irritating character because he always goes, Snarf, Snarf. Editor, popping right back in. Something else I want to give you a heads up with Snarf. He also has the name of Uncle Osbert. That's right, he has the name Uncle Osbert. You end up finding this later on with Snarfer, but that's another character. And I digress. Back to the show. Editor out. With anything that he says, or Snarf, Snarf, is a big thing about it. After that, we'll probably stick with the youngest characters that we have, which is going to be Wily Kit and Wily Cat. These are the youngsters. They end up having a bunch of, ropes and tricks that ends up being their arsenal to go up against any kind of the mutants. They're a little bit more cunning out of the group, and they also the little bit of troublemakers that you end up running into. Then we also have Cheetara, who's the fastest one out of the bunch. She has the staff that magically extends, and she's also the fastest and actually has the ability of the sixth sense, where she'll be able to possibly tell the future of using it. While we're talking about abilities, let's talk about Tygra. Tygra has the Bolo Whip. He's also the architect of the Cat's Lair, and he's more onto the building part of with it. But he also has a sense to make you think that something's there when it's not. So it's an illusionary sense that comes over the head. However, both of these powers are pretty taxing on their bodies. So they're going to end up having to recover after ended up using these at extended use. So that leaves us with Panthro, the Deadly. Why is he deadly? Well, he knows every martial arts there is to man. He's also one of those that could take salvaging to a whole new level. Where, like you see in the cartoon, where he ends up taking the ship that the Thundercats crashed over and made the Thunder Tank, which is an amazing vehicle. And he also ends up making all these other vehicles, and he's also the mechanic of the Thundercats. As potent as he is at being a mechanic, he's even more deadly because of his fierce ferocity of strength. And then we still have Jaga. Jaga, after he did pass, he decided to stay as a ghost and be able to try to mentor our young Lion-O. And this is going to be where he kind of takes on a different case because he always stays around him and is always with him. These are going to be all the Thundercats that you can end up having. If there's something more that you're interested into, like breaking down the vehicles, breaking down the weapons, specifically like the Sword of Omens, because we can end up diving down that rabbit hole, let us know down in the comments down below. And this ends up breaking down the entire Thundercats line that we end up having. It covers the main characters that we have from the original run. Editor dashing back in here. Well, I want to make sure that we end up having this finished out right. So, I want to be saying that this is inspired from the classic Thundercats, which you can see from the 80s cartoon / anime. And then also with the newer stuff that's coming over, have a good introduction to all these characters. Alright, editor out in the content we're putting out, like, subscribe, and hit that little bell icon to be notified whenever we come out with new content. Thank you for watching, and until next time, Thundercats, ho!